Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Mushing Alaska podcast coverage of the 2023 Iditarod. We're your hosts, Brendan and Sean. And, well, uh, man, it's exciting. We're getting close to the coast, and there's a lot going on. Before we get into things, I just want to take a second and ask everyone, if they haven't already, to like and subscribe. I usually forget to do that until the end of this. So take the opportunity to do that now. And I also just want to give a shout out to the fans as well. We literally started this YouTube thing like a week ago. And, there's been a lot of great feedback and a lot of subscribers and views. And I'm just surprised that it's going this well. So we appreciate you guys kind of like working with us as we figure out, some of the ins and outs of doing this for the first time. And, Sean, I don't know. Are you checking some of the comments on YouTube at all, or no?
Yeah, I get notifications, and sometimes get to check them out. Yeah, uh, I've seen a few.
Yeah, so I was gonna just tell you about one that kind of I when I was checking it out earlier today, I was like, oh, that was a really nice message. This guy Joe from Rhode Island wrote in and just like said, keep up the good work, and that he plays our videos for an adult day center. And I was just like, that's awesome. So I just wanted to give Joe and the
Hmm.
folks in Massachusetts where he works a nice little shout out. Appreciate you guys. Um, and
Awesome, that's so cool.
it was a nice message. And you know if you guys want to interact with us, we're happy to do that. We've got Facebook, we've got the YouTube, we've got Instagram. So you know feel free to leave us any feedback, or like I've said before, if y'all have questions about anything in particular, we're happy to talk about it. So just let us know. But with that being said, dude, let's get into the race, man. Tell me what's on your mind.
This is like by far the most eventful day of the Iditarod thus far. So much has happened. We obviously this morning we got the um, kind of brutal news that Brent Sass, due to health concerns, get medevaced from Eagle Island. His dogs are fine. Um, and yeah, Brent's a tough guy, so it means he must have really not been feeling well. He said in an interview, he literally like when he camped his dog, he like didn't have the strength to like do anything but just get take a nap and then mush to the next checkpoint, so where he knew his race was over. Um, that's tough to hear. And then we have um Eddie Burke Jr. had an eventful run to Eagle Island. Uh, and why don't you share the news, Brennan?
What you mean about Eddie?
Yeah.
Oh man. If we are correct, then it's his birthday. He's having a fun little birthday, that's for sure. So he fell asleep behind the. I shouldn't say fell asleep. He nodded off, and by the time he woke up and caught himself, the dogs had taken off. So he. I'm glad you brought this up because I was interested how this works. He even talks about how he got a little bit of assistance from, what was it, Hunter Key for a little bit, and I think one other musher. And then ultimately
Christian
he,
Turner.
yeah, Christian Turner, that was it. Ultimately I think, probably a little bit of guilt. Felt like he was slowing him down, and he just started walking. And then at some point, one of the one of the I guess volunteers working on the trail with a snow machine picked him up and scooped him up and brought him in. Um, so got to be tough. I know he lost some hours there, but I was just kind of curious, like you've heard stories of certain people having help and it being disqualified. So can you tell us more about why this is a case where he could get that help but not get disqualified?
Yeah. Firstly, people ask this anytime you go on a sled dog tour, and you get on a sled and uh, you can feel the team lunging forward at each stop that you take, and you're like, man, what happens when you fall off? And I'm like, They don't stop and wait for you. I'll tell you that much. There's really only one instance I've ever heard of, and I'm sure there's more instances that I just haven't heard of them. But that team has actually turned around to go back to uh, their musher, and you can't say, "Hey, whoa, whoa, stop the team, whoa." Typically what the command is. But when you say "whoa," you're also hitting the brakes, and they feel the resistance, they hear the "whoa," and they stop. But when you yelling "whoa," you can do that as loud as you want, and it's not going to stop your team. They'll just look back at you like, "What? Whoa? What are we talking about? Whoa!" And it's fun. It's not fun, but I have lost a team before, and it's uh, I what I'm describing as fun is the look on the dogs' faces when they realize that you fell off. They kind of grin, and then they take off and they run even a little bit faster. Um, but yeah, this is, one of the two ways you fall off. It's either on a technical trail or it's you've fallen asleep. And you're battling sleep deprivation out there. You're running through wee hours of the morning. It's the witching hours. It's hard to stay alert out there. So he nodded off, hit the ground. I'm sure he woke up right away and was like, shit. Uh, and mushers by, they don't have to give him a ride. Most of the time when you're that close to the front of the pack, they don't give you a ride. It says a lot about Hunter Keefe, who's battling with him for Rookie of the Year. It says a lot about Christian Turner. These guys stop and make sure that Eddie's okay and gave him a little bit of a ride. And then he started walking. And eventually, maybe Hunter got to the checkpoint and let the checkpointers know, hey, you know, uh, Eddie's out there, his team's out there. And so, they went and got the team and they got Eddie back to the checkpoint. It says this clearly in the rules that you can use any means necessary to be reunited with your dog team. Uh, Snow machine, get a ride, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's never to your advantage to not be on the sled. So yeah, you can't just get off the sled and tell the dogs to hike to home. It's never going to work out. And anytime you get separated with your team, things can go like pretty wrong. Uh, if they were to lose the trail, but this trail is super well defined, and they're only going in one direction. There's no other trail. There's no other wrong turn to take. They understand. Dogs literally have trained several thousand miles, not just this winter, but their whole lives on trails. So they know to stay on the trail. And if he fell right outside of Grayling, he would have mushed for 40 plus miles straight until they get to the checkpoint or until they catch up to another dog team. Fortunately, since they're so far into the race, they kind of seem to have kept like their running speed. What can happen is if you were to do this with too strong of a team and and you need to be back there to ride the break, they might go too fast. They might start going 11 or 12 miles an hour, and that's when you start to see some of those sorenesses appear. So he really got super lucky to get not only get reunited with his team. That's totally fine. From all the signs that I'm seeing, the veterinarian in the video I had already inspected his entire team and told Eddie, hey, look, they look pretty good. He's like, all right, that's good. And the dog's body language looked fine. So uh, really fortunate for him. I think he definitely lost a little bit of that lead that he had on Hunter Keefe, and now they both rolled into the Caltag only about 50 minutes apart. So that's this race for Rookie of the Year is heated, and we'll see. I'm sure that Eddie on that run to Caltag has, figured out what exactly, how's the dogs looking after that little incident. That was pretty exciting for them, but he didn't seem to rest that much longer in Eagle Island, and we'll see how long he rests in Caltech. But it seems like the dogs kind of worked out, and I think maybe he lost an hour or so on time, but I don't think he may have really not made too much of an effect on his race. So that's good for Eddie. We're happy. We love Eddie.
Yeah, we do. Shout out to the homie. Um, so one thing I was curious about is, it says that his in time was at 4:30, was that when he got to Caltag, or is that when his dogs got to Caltag?
Hmm. That's a good question. I
Because
wonder. I
like
would
it
think that it's probably his dogs,
right, because you were
but
saying in theory Hunter Keefe got to the checkpoint and told them that he lost the dogs, but also the dogs ran to the checkpoint, so they probably knew that as well. So I don't know. I just was kind of thinking
what
about
I'm
that.
seeing right now is that his dog team looked like they got there at 3 on the tracker.
Okay.
So
So his dogs are going to be
let's
well
see.
rested then, is what that means.
Uh, I mean, they got there and the dogs were just kind of, yeah, they got there right at 3,
Is that a
and
situation
then
where, like, while they're waiting to reunite Eddie with his dogs, that he can, like, were they given food or water or, like, any hay for them
yeah,
to.
I think it's kind. I don't know the exact details of the what the veterinarians did, but when they got there, what I saw in the videos, they still had the booties on. They didn't have any straw laid out. I think what the vets are going to do in that situation is just make sure the dogs are okay, but not, you can't be gaining a competitive advantage from getting separated from your team. So if you come back and, yeah, we fed the dogs, we bedded them down, they've been sleeping for an hour, and Hunter Keith's like, what the hell is this? I just gave this guy a ride. And he's out here, he's got his team already bedded down. No, they do just enough to make sure the dogs are okay. They seem totally fine, and I think Eddie, that time must that 4:30 you said
Yeah.
is the time that Eddie showed up. So the dogs were there for about an hour and a half, which isn't too bad. And so he lost about an hour and a half of time because typically he would have just rested about 4 to 4.5 hours. So he's probably there for more like 6 hours. But I wouldn't say that the dogs necessarily got like an extra hour and a half of rest. They were just kind of sitting there hanging out. They weren't like passed out sleeping or fed or anything. So, yeah, it seems like that's kind of the best case scenario for Eddie.
He seemed super tired in that video, man. You could just,
Dude, he
the combination of probably frustration and then sleep deprived was just kind of like written all over his face. And then to make matters worse, he had to walk an hour and a half or whatever we're estimating, speculating, in that state of anger and being sleep deprived. That just had to be, and like I felt like he wanted to say, I felt like he saw the cameras and he didn't get to talk to the dogs the way he maybe wanted to talk to the dogs if the cameras weren't right there, like, oh, you guys, what have you been up to without me? It's like, I know he wanted to be like, you son of.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't expect anything else from a dog team. Anytime you fall off, they're never gonna stop. I mean, it's just not the only time that you would be able to catch up with them is if you're on a technical trail and you're not on the sled, you're not driving it. The sled falls off, like you saw, for example, in like at the Jen LeBar video or something, and the sled just like falls off the trail and wraps around a tree, and then that stops the team. But on a flat, straight trail up to Yukon River, you better believe that thing ain't stopping anytime soon. So I don't think he can. There's an old adage in mushing that's extremely true, and that is that it is never the dog's fault. It's never the dog's fault. So and Eddie knows that better than anyone out there, or as good as anyone out there. But let's move on from Eddie.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in our last recording, we were talking about how things were looking good for Jessie Holmes. It seemed like he had, you know, I think it was a difference of opinions, but ultimately it looked like he was a run or half a run ahead of, and now it looks like he's kind of like laid off the brakes, or maybe the dogs aren't keeping that pace that he was hoping to keep. But I wanted to bring that up and just get more of your perspective on that.
Yeah, man, a little bit surprising there. So look, he's only been at Caltag for what he got there like 2:30. It's 5:30, so he's over 5 hours there. Right now it's 7:30. Yeah, so he's over 5 hours there. And he camped like 40 miles or so, 45 miles from Caltag. So he was kind of set up to go through Caltag and camp at tripod cabin, one of the shelter cabins that's on the way, and then pushed a Unilocleat from there, right? So for him to stop at all in Caltag was kind of surprising.
Right.
And then when I looked at the tracker replay, we noticed you mentioned this to Chad this morning that he was camped out on the trail. Ryan Reddington, Pete Kaiser, and Richie Deal all passed him on the trail, and then right after they passed him, you see Jessie Holmes had picked up and started running again. Well, as you see him chasing those three with going on a shorter run with more rest, you would expect him to keep up with them just fine. But it's hard to tell very well on the tracker, but it seemed like he fell behind like quite a bit in a short distance, like 45-mile run, and it looked like the gap widened like a noticeable amount. I mean, a few miles. So he had a slower team, and maybe look, we can only speculate. Like I only have so much information, but this is just. Well, I'll tell you what my next opinion tomorrow morning. But look, I think maybe he's seeing all right. His dogs are slowing down a little bit. Maybe he's not doing well. At first, I thought, okay, he's stopping in Caltag. He wants to keep his team really strong, um, and more rested than the other three teams, and then he'll be able to make a move at the coastline. That's what I thought 2 hours ago. Well, now that I looked at the replay and I saw that gap widening, and it seems like he kind of is decided, all right, maybe I need to reel it in a little bit. Let's build this team back up and get out there and keep this team strong, even if that means I can't win the Iditarod and I finish in sixth place. That's okay. Maybe he'll be there for a lot longer than that. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's got some kind of issue. He hasn't been sleeping well. He's not exactly the biggest dude. He's losing some weight out there a little bit. He had a serious life or death, a near death experience this fall, having a building collapse on him, and he's still recovering from the injuries. So there might be just other things at play here than what I'm seeing on the tracker. But all I saw was a slightly slower dog team and a guy stopped where I didn't think he was going to stop. So we'll see. We'll see on the next interview. I don't know, but all I know is Richie Deal, P. Kaiser, and Reddington. These guys are now
They're
the
the front
leading
pack.
3-pack, right? Jessie Holmes has now, at best case scenario, part of the chase pack.
And so,
Unless, I mean, maybe he makes a move or whatever later, but yeah.
so and that's what my next question was. You kind of led into that for me, which is who would you consider to be in the next pack? And so let me ask a caveat to that question. So Jesse's in that pack right now, but next up on the list is Kelly Maxner, but he is not leaving for another 3 hours. So I'm wondering if you think maybe Milla or Matt Failer or Eddie Burke might be considering taking off before Kelly's 8 hour is up.
Milla's also taking her 8 hour in Caltech.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about
So
that.
she's even farther behind Maxner by about an hour and a half. But yeah, Failer, he pulled in at 4:25. So you see in like a window opening for Failer. I mean, you might see all of a sudden Matt Failer's in fourth place. 4:25 right now. It's 7:45. So in 45 minutes he will have been there for 4 hours. You're gonna, what typically these guys, if they have a strong team and they're up for it, they're going between a 4 and 5 hour rest. So we're gonna see Matt Failer likely leaving here before within the next hour. So you might see him depending on what Jessie Holmes is doing. He's already been there for 5 hours, coming off a short run. I'm suspect. Right, Kelly Maxner, Milla Porsche, they're on their 8 hour rest. Matt Failer right now might be looking at fourth place. And then Eddie B might be looking at fifth place. So he only came in 5 minutes after Failer.
And his dogs were already there. So really, when Eddie leaves from this checkpoint, it'll just be a matter of him, and based on what we were saying and how tired he was looking, hopefully he can maybe catch some Z's and feel a little bit refreshed. But he has an opportunity to make up for some of that lost time with, Kelly and Milla on their 8 hour, with Jessie kind of up in the air right now. He could be right in there in the top five. So just pretty interesting there to look at that. And then, do you have anyone else that you want to mention before I wanted to ask you about the run to Unalakleet? But before we get to that, is there anyone else you want to talk about?
Yeah. I want to say, firstly, a shout out to Gerhardt. Um, I think he was for a while quite a ways back, and I was a little concerned that he wasn't keeping up the pace early on in the race, and he's in Grayling now. He's surrounded by Joanna Jagao, Bailey Vitello, and Bridget Watkins, um, Jason Mackey. They're all right there in this group, all kind of traveling together, and they're seeing a lot of each other out in the trail. And I'm just kind of Gerhardt and Bridget Watkins. Those guys had that scratch last year, and so I'm just excited to see that they're this race. They're keeping competitive at the back of the pack, and things are looking good. Things are looking good for a good old belt buckle for Gerhardt and Bridget. So that's pretty awesome.
That's nice. As you say that, I'm just going into the map and actually updating where he's at, just because, like, I made the map manually, and so essentially, like, I put everyone in maybe half an hour ago. So as we get to certain people that are on the trail, if it's not quite up to date, I'm kind of going in and checking it and going back and updating it accordingly. So, like, I just moved Eric Kelly. Eric Kelly's in Anvik, and so on and so forth. So just thought I would fill in the blanks. If you see something moving on the screen, it's because I'm updating it as I see it on the tracker. Again, you have to pay to be a member of the Iditarod Insider, and we are in full support of their website. We did show them in a video yesterday, but that was kind of some unforeseen circumstances, and again, we want to just respect what they've got going on. So, anyways, back to things, Sean.
Yeah. So I don't know. Before I guess the next thing I'm looking at is Jed Stevenson. He's in Anvik. He got there at 11:20, and it's so at 7:20 that would be his 8 hour rest. So just keeping an eye on Jed and making sure things are all right there. He could have been he was if he's sticking to an 8 hour rest and not doing more than that, he would have left half an hour ago. But he's still there, and so not I don't want to jump to conclusions, but that's a yellow flag.
That's tough. I like Jed. He's got good vibes. So hopefully a little extra time sets him right, and he can get back on the trail there.
Yeah, and Eric Kelly, uh, he's in the Red Lantern position, last place, and yeah, hopefully these guys can keep up that pace and stay in this race. And I guess as we're continuing to the backpack, we had another scratch today.
Yep.
Bummer. News for Greg Vitello, but look, we've been eyeing him since Nikolai, even before then, that he was quite a ways back. He took a lot of rest, and maybe those first 100, 200 miles kind of set him back a little bit. Maybe he needed to take all that rest. I don't know, but yeah, he was quite a ways back. They said it was in the best interest of his dogs. It's potentially that. It could just be that he was quite a ways back and they couldn't keep the volunteers at the checkpoints and the veterinarians and all the things. I don't know the finer details of that, but he's no longer in the race. His son is, and I'm sure he'll fly to Iditarod or fly to Nome and greet his son at the finish line. Hopefully, if everything continues to go well for Bailey Vitale, who seems to be running a really good race. I haven't quite looked at his run times, but the fact that he's sticking with Jason Mackey and Gerhard and Joanne Dragao, yeah, that's good signs for the younger Vitale. But back to the run, Caltag to Unalakleet.
Yes, sir.
So I looked up. I've done this run, and I remember I was like, man, I remember it being kind of uphill, but like pretty gradual, like not a crazy hill, just a seemingly eternal hill. So for essentially, this is right the portage from Caltag to Unalakleet. So Native Alaskans have been here in Alaska for at the very least like 10,000, potentially much longer, 10,000 years, right? And they used this trail from Caltag to Unalakleet, and they would travel along that trail to whether to get to the Yukon River and go fishing and get some salmon, and then get to the coast and go whaling or whatever. So this is a cool section of trail. It's really long, around 82 miles. There's a couple sheltered cabins along the way that have some creature comforts, and they're maintained by the Bureau of Land Management. And the two cabins are called Tripod Cabin and Old Woman's Cabin. I believe the Tripod Cabin comes first, and Old Woman's close to a little over halfway to Unalakleet. But these guys don't really give a shit about a cabin. They're trying to win the Iditarod, so they're going to stop wherever's good for their dog team. Ray, you see these, all these times up the Yukon River Trail was super fast and continues to be. Nick Petit's going 8.8 miles an hour. Christian Turner 9.1. All these front runners are going 9.5 plus miles an hour. I think Hunter Keefe is still putting up the fastest run times. And second fastest run times are Ryan Reddington. And, Hunter Keefe is running Reddington dogs. So, people in the mushing world, there's a few different kind of lines of Alaskan Huskies, and not to get too lost in the weeds of what an Alaskan Husky is, but there's just like Reddington dogs, and there's Jeff King dogs, and there's the CV dogs, and they all kind of have their own temperament and physical attributes. And Reddington dogs, they got that speed. It seems to be, they're always out in front early in the race, but this is cool to see Ryan out there in the front towards the back third of this race. And Hunter Keefe's clearly got just as fast as dogs, just had a little bit more rest on them. And Reddington, Ryan, he took his 8-hour rest back all the way back in Shagaluk. And so it's cool to see like a couple different strategies work out, right? Run your own race, run the dog team in front of you. What feels good to you? Ryan Reddington stopped in Shagaluk, and Richie Deal and Pete Kaiser, I believe they took their 8-hour in Grayling, I want to say. And so, yeah, we got ourselves a race, my dude. And Ryan Reddington right now, he's 669 mile. That's where he's at. And Richie Deal's about 45 minutes behind him. My race mile is 663. So these guys are moving a little bit slower because they're going uphill. And also maybe the trail's a little softer. I'm not sure. But eventually they're going to get to the top of the pass. And once they get to the top of the pass, they're going to just begin this really long, winding descent to the coast. And it's a really good feeling once you get to finally see that water, see that coast off in the distance, because you can see for quite a ways. Of course, it's nighttime, so they're not going to be able to see that.
Right. And I was listening to there was a video from Liz, and she was already in Unalakleet, and she was just kind of talking about the different amenities that Unalakleet has. And I think that we were talking about that with Chad earlier today, about how there are a lot of amenities, and it can be, at that point in the race, it can be easy to get sucked into some of those amenities. Excuse me. But they have like the pizza place there that we were talking about, Peace on Earth. she was talking about some sourdough pancakes. There's a place where you can go and actually sleep on a big bed. So it can be a great place to recover for some people, but you can lose your steam there as well.
Yeah, I slept on one of those beds, and I think I stopped for, I don't know, somewhere between 5 hours, 6 hours, and I had like a 2 hour nap, which in Iditarod standards is pretty long. I swear to God, I got in that bed, I closed my eyes, and I woke up like 1 second later, and it had been 2 hours, and I was like, "Fuck!" And then you set your alarm for, uh, you can tell the checkers, "Hey, I want to wake up at 4 a.m." and they'll knock on your door at 4 a.m.
Okay,
Yeah, they
that's
knocked on my door, and I was like, "I hate you, whoever you are. You are my enemy now. Why did you wake me up?" but yeah, they had a full kitchen of this guy just cranking out like all you can eat bacon, eggs, pancakes. There was like pizza boxes everywhere, dude. Uh, yeah, I was feeling like a king in Unilocleat, and I wish I could have stayed there for 24 hours, honestly.
so. I do want to kind of keep this on the short side, but I did want to just get into your opinion on the run from Caltag to Unilocleat. A lot of those guys just took a 4 hour rest or so, or 3 ish hour rest. So that tells me that they're probably breaking up the run. But is there anyone you think that's bold enough to just make the run straight to Unilocleat?
I would, if anyone does it, it'll be Ryan, but I don't think so. He's doesn't need to, and but maybe I don't know. I guess what, Brendan. I don't know, but if I were writing a schedule, I would be thinking that you run 60 miles of this run if you're feeling good about your dog team. Rest for 4.5 hours, 5 hours, and so you're camping, what, 15 to 20 miles short of Unilocleat, and then you blow through Unilocleat. Don't stop there. Don't eat any pizza or bacon or eggs or sleep on the bed. Just blow right through there. Miss all those things and go straight to Shaktoolik. So you can do that Caltag to Shaktoolik in two 60-mile runs. What's Caltag's at 652, Shaktoolik at 777. So that would be 52 to
Yeah.
it's 125 miles. So you could do that in like two 62.5 mile runs, which is a
Oh, nice.
reasonable way to do it.
Okay. It'll be interesting to
Uh,
monitor that.
yeah, and then you might see someone go right to Unilocleat. You might see them stop halfway and take a short rest, then go to Unilocleat. I don't know. It's still a lot of trail left, man. Look how long like the coastal trail is. It's like you get to the coast and it feels like you're close to the finish line, but dude, you got a long way to go, and
Yeah.
it's really like probably some of the toughest trail of the whole race, and the whole time. It's crazy how difficult the first half of the race is, but somehow the last half is even harder. So yeah, this it'll be interesting, and they're close enough to each other that they can pretty much figure out what each person's gonna do. So if Ryan Reddington pulls over at a certain mile, then I know that Richie and Pete are gonna know. Okay, this is what Ryan's doing, and it probably we'll see if that affects what they want to do. And Richie and Pete are best friends, and they're right next to each other in second and third place, and that's kind of a fun
Yeah.
factor.
That's pretty
So
badass.
yeah, dude. Yeah, and the Reddingtons, they're overdue for long overdue to win this race. Joe Reddington Sr. is like his Ryan Reddington's like grandpa, great grandpa started the Iditarod. Ramey Reddington was a top competitor, and Ryan's brother Ray. You got Robert Reddington. All these guys. Everybody in Mushing has a Reddington dog, but never once have they won the Iditarod. And the Reddington family right now, they're on the edge of their seat,
I'm sure
and
they are.
and then as far as everybody in Mushing, without a doubt, the entire Mushing community just loves Richie Deal and loves Pete Kaiser. But since Pete already won the Iditarod, I think look at that front trio. Richie Deal is probably the fan favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about, well, all right, now that things are shaping out, who do I want to win? And I think for me, I like Richie Deal. I like Jesse Holmes too, but seems like he might have to kind of get back into it. So yeah, it'll be exciting. This next few days is really going to be something, and we'll be sure to continue to keep you guys updated. We will be live sometime soon, so be on the lookout for that. We'd love to do that and have some interaction with you guys during one of these. That could be pretty cool. Um, but Sean, do you have anything else you want to say before we go ahead and sign this off?
Fun fact about the Iditarod: it always the second weekend of the Iditarod is always daylight savings. So change your clocks. You wake up tomorrow and spring forward.
Yeah, yeah. So it's now essentially 1 o'clock on the East Coast, and yeah, thank God these phones do that automatically for us. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and look out for the next one. It'll be coming soon.